Have you ever wondered whether the problems in the world today would exist if we had deeper connection to ourselves, others, and the environment, and acted from that place?
Welcome to the Conscious Action Podcast with your hosts Brian Berneman and Kayla Greenville, who believe that connection is the key to taking conscious action as individuals and creating a better world.
We are here to raise awareness and inspire meaningful action by sharing stories, knowledge, and conversations with thought leaders and change makers.
From sustainability to well-being and everything related to conscious living, our mission is to empower you to be the change that you want to see in the world. Welcome to a new episode of the Conscious Action Podcast. I'm Brian, and for this episode, we have two guests that are here with us, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves in a moment. I always ask everyone to introduce themselves because I never feel like I can make enough justice to who you are as people if I just say like, oh, these guys are from here, or they have done this, that. So welcome and thank you for being here, Hannah and Liam. I'm going to pass it to you to introduce yourselves.
Kia ora, Brian. Thank you for having us on the podcast. It's really lovely.
Yeah.
So I'm Hannah.
I'm Liam.
And we run a project called The Rubbish Trip. So we, since July 2017, have travelled New Zealand full time, giving free talks and presentations all about how individuals can reduce their household rubbish. And our talks are based on our own research and experience. We've lived without a rubbish bin for almost 5.5 years now.
Wow. So pretty much zero waste fanatics and living a really interesting lifestyle for the last 3 years. But I'm sure along with many people, that's changed a lot in these current circumstances with COVID-19. But it's been a really interesting opportunity for us to think about the future, think about how things might change for the better as well, and how we can transition our way of life in a different way that can help support a more sustainable world in these uncertain times. So interesting times.
Yeah, it's interesting time. And one of the things that I find around this time is that I find it is an amazing opportunity. And of course, there's some of us that will have much more challenging situations, and some of us might have much easier situation, but this time that has been this stop in the world for most people, and this time for, okay, like I can sit down, I need to be at home, I need to reassess how I'm living. And I find this incredible for people that are not especially on this journey. Like, as you say, like since like 2017, you've been working on this project, and like for the last 5 years, you haven't had a rubbish bin, but we are still the minority, the ones that we are in this path. So what have you noticed during this time, particularly for you, but also for the people that you've been talking to or that you've seen around?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like if we take it like really narrow observations of zero waste generally, like a lot of people when we first started going into lockdown were really concerned that this was going to make it really difficult to maintain waste reducing behaviours, and recycling systems were collapsing and all that kind of stuff. But what we found, actually, we've managed to maintain our zero waste lifestyle all through lockdown, virtually unchanged. And what's interesting is that a lot of the behaviours that help you to navigate lockdown are actually quite similar to the kind of behaviours that help you to live zero waste, particularly things like being flexible. You know, when we're in ordinary times and we want to buy something and the only option is something packaged, then we just actually say, oh, well, do we really need this? Probably not. We'll just substitute with something else. And it's the same with lockdown. Something that we ordinarily get might not be available unpackaged during lockdown. We just go without it and we just get something else. Also, being able to make things from scratch, make do with what you have available to you at any one time. That's a really important part of zero waste living, being resourceful, and that also fits completely with lockdown living. Just making do, you know, there's no flour anywhere. Oh well, I guess we'll have to use something else. And also being creative. is a huge part of zero waste living, finding solutions to tricky problems. And again, with lockdown, that's been really beneficial habit and practice to have in place. So yeah, for us, we've actually found that having the entire nation go into lockdown, probably a lot of people are living more similarly to how we would ordinarily live.
That's on I suppose, a personal lifestyle level. But we both noticed as well that because of this pause, as you mentioned, and this opportunity to see things from a different perspective, I think people have reassessed the kind of business as usual things. And, initially it was like this kind of really stark trauma and people didn't know what to do. There's a lot of confusion, and like we're working with businesses and stores who are really committed to zero waste, who really struggled actually because there was confusing messages coming from government about whether they were allowed to be open during lockdown and not, and all these sorts of things, and the kind of the potential spillover effects of that, of putting their suppliers out of business and things like that. And there was a lot of confusion, but I think now things are starting to settle a little bit, and people are realizing that, it is this opportunity to actually redesign how we do things, how we get food to people, how our supply chains work, how we package food, how we buy food, how we consume, all these really fundamental questions about, how we access the necessities of life, how we feed ourselves, and all that sort of thing. And so, and we've actually, we found there's of course, it's still within a select number of people, but there's this new appetite people have to take this opportunity. Let's put into place not just something that's going to last for the pandemic, but something that can be really long term, a real fundamental change in the way that we run our business, or the way that we structure our economy, and all these things. So that's been actually really exciting, although of course, again, as you said, the trauma, but the opportunities are already starting to be, the first steps are starting to be taken. So very exciting.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I find that one of the aspects that I noticed from the past 10-15 years in my life is that a lot of the actions that can be taken by living a more simple lifestyle are actually quite conducive to becoming more zero waste, or reducing our footprint, and having better relationships, and having a more connected space with nature and other people. And there's so many aspects that it's not just zero waste. And it's one of the things that I find with this time, that people were able to slow down. And as you say, like, people can make some food from scratch, like whether they have flour or not, like they're able to do that, and reconnect with that part that has been missing because of the busyness of life. Like a lot of people, and I see this with a lot of my clients, it's like busy, I don't have time. Well, now suddenly a lot of people have time. They're at home. They need to talk to their housemates, or they need to talk to their spouse or their partners, and how all of this time has created, as you were just saying, Liam, these opportunities. Even though there's a lot of challenges and trauma, there's a lot of opportunities. I wanted to go to one question. I sent you guys some questions before, and I'm going to ask you the first one. And the first one has to do, of course, this is conscious action. And the first one is, which is the unconscious action that you used to do that you can't believe now that you used to? And that can be a big one or a small one, but just to get us into the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably so many unconscious actions that we used to do that horrify us now. And there's probably many we're still doing that in about a year, 5 years, 10 years, we'll be like, oh my goodness. But to pick just one for me, and we'll each share a different one because it's personal. But for me, like, you know, now we live this zero waste lifestyle and we're so hyper mindful of anything that might end up going into a rubbish bin or even a recycling bin. What I think is really interesting is looking back and the lead up to our decision to live without a rubbish bin. For many years before that, we had already been quite waste conscious, and we did all these little ritualistic behaviors to reduce waste, you know, bringing a reusable shopping bag to the supermarket, always having a reusable water bottle, always having a keep cup if we got coffee on the go or whatever. We already did all these little things, but somehow we still had this massive blind spot about the fact that we were still producing rubbish, particularly associated with our grocery shopping. And it was almost like that wasn't real rubbish somehow, or that we felt that it wasn't something we could control, so we didn't question it or anything like that. And looking back now, yeah, it was like this unconscious action of just always buying food the way that we thought we had to at the supermarkets or whatever, and producing all of this waste. And looking back now, you know, like, it's like it would be really difficult for us to go back on those practices that we've changed now. And every time that we bring anything into our life, we'll consider what's going to happen to this if we no longer need it. That's completely transformed now. Like, we were, very mindful.
Yeah, we used to, I remember just getting things just because they were available and never sort of questioning whether there was an alternative to that thing, you know, like, oh, I'm thirsty, I need some water. Oh, there's a water fountain and there's a plastic cup. I didn't even think, can I avoid the plastic cup in some way? You know, it was there and I needed water, so I'll take it, you know. So yeah, that's completely changed for us. But to kind of maybe expand on or go forward from what Hannah was saying to even once we had committed to, you know, reducing our waste, and in the initial part of our journey, it was all about plastic, and it was really interesting because we focused so much on plastic, and of course single-use plastic is such a massive issue. We didn't actually consider all the other types of waste, all the different materials and stuff, and the impact that they might have. And, like, for example, we were like, okay, we're going plastic free, we're going to have to shop in bulk bins, let's go and get a whole bunch of paper bags. And we bought this big stack of brand new brown paper bags that we were going to use. You know, I think we ended up using about 10 of them because we realized we didn't need a giant stack. And you know, talking to friends and stuff who are knowledgeable in these things, you know, and after doing a bit of research and learning that, you know, well, paper actually has a much higher carbon footprint, requires more water to produce. If it goes to landfill, it produces methane, you know, all of these different problems, you know, not the same problems as plastic, but different and you know, equally bad problems that we just didn't even consider. So I think, you know, it kind of went from just being about a material and being about the way that we consume, regardless of what the materials are. So
I think it's an interesting lesson too, in that, like, the reasons that trigger people into lifestyle change may actually be quite different to the reasons that motivate them to continue with that lifestyle change. Like, for us, we were very focused on the plastic crisis when we decided to go rubbish free, but now the plastic crisis is actually secondary to our desire to live a zero waste lifestyle. And for us now, zero waste is more about resource and energy efficiency in the context of the climate crisis. And it goes without saying that if you use resources and energy efficiently, you're not going to be producing single-use plastics. But that's part of a much bigger picture. So yeah, it is interesting how these things can transform.
Yeah, and the reason why I love this question, and I know that it's a challenging question to think back and things like that, but the reason for me why it's so important is for everyone that is listening to understand that no one was perfect. Like, when I started my own journey of reducing my own footprint, I didn't know what I know now. As you say, like, I started with something, and then suddenly I started realizing, oh wait, that I'm doing is actually, like, I'm creating a similar problem, just from a different aspect. And this is all about learning and going on a journey of discovering based on, as you say, like what I care about. And it's not going to be what I care about the same as you care about, but the more that I learn and the more that I can be kind with myself and with others about where we are all at. Because yeah, it's like 5 years ago I wasn't where I am now. Like I have here, and I like, this is my rubbish from the last 2 years.
Wow.
Amazing.
Brilliant.
And like before that, this like I didn't do this just because like I started doing this at one point when I started like doing events and talks, and I thought like, you know, it's good to show something. But I have this little jar that was like I think that was peanut butter, and it's something that I put there. But more than anything, it's for me. But before, I didn't know. Like I was living a life that I grew up in Argentina, meat-eating country, like a lot of waste, and people didn't even think like it is now. Like I remember when I was a kid, people throwing from their car window, like if they went to McDonald's and just like the takeaways, and they ate it in the car and then they throw it out the window, and that was a normal thing in terms of rubbish. And I thought I like in my family we did that. I think like I can't remember exactly when I was a kid, but I see the transformation and the path that I've had, and it's so incredible. And it's something that I keep on reminding people that is, you don't have to know everything. And where you are now, it's not where you were before. So being kind and keep on having that curiosity of what you care about and where are you going with that.
Yeah.
And with that, I would love to know a little bit more for each of you, like a little bit about like your childhood or your upbringing, and seeing how those experiences perhaps shaped the person that you are now.
Yeah. My I think maybe the one thing I can think of which was maybe an influence from my childhood was my father was always really, really interested in issues that no one else was talking about, like and now which are considered, you know, green issues or whatever. He wasn't kind of like a typical hippie or greenie or anything like that. He's a firefighter, but I didn't know anyone else. You know, he was reading in the 90s lots of things about climate change, lots of things about peak oil and oil consumption and all sorts of these things. And at the time, I know I didn't really care. I wasn't interested in it at all. But I was interested in the fact that he took it so seriously, and he would talk about, you know, how he would have conversations with his workmates, and they thought he was weird and crazy and all this sort of stuff, you know, focusing on the stuff. And I thought that was quite an interesting aspect. Why do people find it a strange thing? That actually sparked my curiosity rather than the issue itself, to actually learn more about it. So I think I guess I have my dad to thank for for that, at least just sparking that curiosity for me. But I think that it's hard to. I'd have to spend a lot of time thinking more into my childhood about some of these things that feed into why I do the things I do now. But I do remember some. I think, you know, there's always been these messages in New Zealand too about growing up in New Zealand. You know, be a tidy Kiwi, keep New Zealand beautiful. Some of these campaigns about what's the right thing to do with rubbish, and, you know, we like to keep our streets tidy and we don't throw our rubbish out the window, whatever. And then when I went traveling, when I finished university, you know, seeing that wasn't necessarily the case in other countries, not because people didn't care necessarily, but because they didn't have a small population like New Zealand did, and they didn't have rubbish trucks and whatever, that infrastructure to clean it up. So confronting that and understanding what that meant for me, and having those messages pumped into me for a long time, and actually, are we any better in New Zealand just because we put all our stuff into a rubbish bin? You know, that was quite an interesting perspective shift just from being in another place, which, yeah, maybe has informed the way I think now.
Yeah, totally different to Liam. My parents, like as I grew up with both my parents, and they're definitely not environmentally minded, or they weren't then, and definitely not like might know about the environmental issues, but certainly wouldn't take the time to put into practice through lifestyle change or anything like that. But were both like quite politically minded and quite sort of lefty, I suppose, socially. So certainly grew up in a household that with very strongly articulated political views. So into that kind of habit of questioning things. But I think probably one of the key things for me is my parents are both quite atheist, and so no spiritual or religious kind of background as I was growing up. And I think when you grow up without that spiritual or religious framework, you do look for meaning outside of those kind of constrictions. Or also, for me personally, what that has meant for me is that my belief is like, this is it, this is what we have, this life, this planet, this is everything. And so it gives me this really strong feeling of the importance of doing everything that we can to make this world as wonderful a place as it can be for all of us who have the amazing opportunity to have this slice of existence here. And, you know, I feel this really strong drive to protect what we have, and also to be to act as a steward. You know, the gratitude that I have to be alive is so huge, and the gratitude I have to the planet, whether or not you see the planet as sort of semi-sentient or not at all, just a rock that floats around, whatever it is, it's at home. And I feel a really strong sense of gratitude, and I want to be able to, if I can't give back, at the very least not make it worse. You know, like it's like that thing of you know, it's Mother's Day today, like you express gratitude to your parents for bringing you to this world and for sustaining you and looking after you. And I guess it's the same for me with the earth. Without having that spiritual belief that there is somebody else looking out for us, like I don't believe that. So, you know, I really believe it's up to us to work alongside all species on this planet to look after it. So I think that's really strong motivator for me.
Beautiful. Like it's so incredible, like always for me to see a little bit in people's background, and how with different backgrounds and different understandings and different beliefs, we can still, in a sense, come together in certain areas and have the same awareness of certain aspects of life, regardless of where we are from and our beliefs. Like I said, like I'm from Argentina, you guys are from New Zealand, and I grew up in a very consumeristic life, and Liam, you grew up with a parent that care about some of this stuff, and like how we can all see the sameness even when there's so much difference. And I think that for me, that's one of the most important aspects of where we're going and how to achieve our goals as humanity, and to work together in more cooperation and collaboration, because this is one of the ways that we need to do things. It's not longer like what we've been doing for a long time, it's not working. So how can we change our ways to see, okay, these are all of the things that unite us, these are the things that we can get behind, and we can be like, yes, let's be stewards for the lands, yes, let's live the place that we're in now better than we found it. And that for different people is going to be focused on different aspects, but we can all be part of that all together. And how did you guys found each other and found this common goal of living this lifestyle?
So we talked about my very non-spiritual background. We met at Bhakti Lounge in Wellington, which is the ISKCON Krishna Consciousness Center in Wellington. They did yoga and meditation and delicious vegan meals. So we met there. And we were together for a while, and then I decided to go traveling after uni, and Liam was staying for another year to do his honors. So we sort of stayed together, but we were at long distance for quite a few months. And then Liam came over to Europe for his traveling too. And at that point I was working in London for an organization working with people living in poverty. So I worked with them for about a year, and Liam would come and see me in London and then carry on traveling. And it was in London that I became even more aware about waste issues, and over that year I was feeling it really strongly, and feeling this thing of working for this organization doing amazing social work, but feeling like it was really disconnected to environmental issues. And for me, the two are so connected. And so I don't know why, but one day near the end of my time in London, I Googled living without a rubbish bin.
Was it that trigger from that photo?
Yeah, well, that was one of the many triggers. This amazing photo exhibition called 7 Days of Garbage by this US photographer called Greg Segal. But yeah, so I just Googled living without a rubbish bin. And as soon as I pressed go, you know, what came up was just hundreds of people all around the world who were doing it already. And I'm quite like, once I know something is possible, I just kind of feel like you can't unknow that. So I was like, yeah, I want to do this. And so I went to Liam, he was there at the time, and I said, Liam, if we go back to New Zealand, would you be keen to try living without a rubbish bin? And Liam was like, yeah, let's do it.
In fact, I said, let's do it now. Why wait till we go back to New Zealand? But yeah, there was a bit of, oh no, hang on, wait a minute, we're going to have to think about this. How does it work? What does it mean? So yeah,
so we were already together, as we were a wasteful couple, and then we transitioned to zero waste together.
You know, it's funny, you know, people often think, what was your eureka moment that you decided to do this? And it's really hard to pinpoint it. But one thing that I keep coming back to, which is the tiniest little thing, but it actually just keeps triggering it, was buying this breakfast topping packet of seeds. It was about 15 grams, you know, this big packet of seeds. There was like maybe 10 times more plastic than there was seeds.
And more like 100.
You know, and that was just like, this as a society, how can we get to this point? This is insane. We've got to change something. What can we do? You know, so that was a trigger for me. So yeah, it was like, why don't we just start now? Let's work it out. And it's step by step. You know, I guess that's the thing that we often try to say, but I think I understood right from the beginning was that it's a step-by-step process, and I always thought it would be like that's not something you do everything overnight. You change absolutely everything. You start the journey. People talk about the journey. It's a journey. You start somewhere and you just take one step at a time. So
but it's interesting you ask us about this in the context of our relationship, because I think that's a really key thing, is that for us doing that step-by-step process, but also having someone else to even just bounce the idea off, like, hey, shall we go try living on a bin? I think it made a really big difference. We'll never know, because we'll never have the opportunity of starting zero waste alone, but I think that it was really like a shared journey for us, and we were able to work off each other's strengths. You know, like Liam loves baking, so that's great. He does the bread. I love doing other things. So, you know, like we were able to play off each other's strengths. And one thing we've noticed when we started doing talks, we didn't start doing talks until the first 18 months of living without a bin. When we started doing talks, the first thing we noticed is that most of the people who come to our talks and most of the people who engage with us on social media, we're talking 80%, identify as female. So we don't see a lot of men come to our talks, and lots of people come up to us at the end and they say, I'm really into this, but how do I get my male partner to be into this too? And we don't really know what to say, to be honest, because we don't have that issue. But it is a really big thing for people if they have to transition to this lifestyle alone, particularly if they have kids, you know, and you've got one parent who doesn't care and one parent who does, and you know, it's a real nightmare. So
It can be a battle, like, yeah, it can be really, really difficult.
so yeah, we certainly feel like our success in reducing waste has been because we're both completely committed to it and have been from the beginning. And we've been able to go so much further than we probably could have done on our own. So yeah.
And I guess the other side of that for us personally is we've been doing this project, the rubbish trip, now for nearly 3 years, and it has involved us, you know, traveling full time, staying in people's homes, and so basically 2 of us working, living, doing everything together 24/7, and on the one hand, it's like amazing, you know, we've been able to sustain it that long and still be together and still be on good terms. But on the other hand, you know, it's a really, you know, it's helped, I think, both of us realize that we do need to find a balance in which we can also explore our independent interests. Because, for example, my background is in music. I actually studied music, studied jazz performance, bachelor's degree, did a master's in music. And that's also a really, really important part of my life. And I've basically had to give that up to a large extent. I've gotten more into it lately, but for the last 3 years. And so finding ways where we can balance these things, you know, as independent people, but also support each other and do a shared project. So yeah, it's been a really interesting dance, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting because like for the past few years now, I've been like, you know, like, if I find like someone to start dating, like, am I already looking for someone that is like zero waste and vegan and like and spiritual, or do I need to get out of like that and be just like, let's see what happens, like, let's see what comes up. And it's really interesting. Like I see it with my sister. She lives in Denmark, and her partner wasn't into all of this, and now like they live this lifestyle together, even though at the beginning he wasn't perhaps experiencing this kind of lifestyle. So one of the things that I'm really interested in what you were just saying is as well, not only the living together and the working together, but the fact that you're traveling around the country. And can you share some of your experiences of traveling around the country and being able to, like, how are you doing that? I know that you guys couch surf. So like, what's the experience like as well? Not only about the rubbish, but traveling around the country and meeting people and all these different things.
Yeah.
Well, it goes back to something you said earlier, Brian, about, you know, low waste living is also just about simple living and being more connected to your community, to the environment and stuff like that. And so a really important part of our project has been that community aspect, and also what some people call the sharing economy, where rather than, you know, we transact everything through money, actually we just offer our knowledge and our presentations for free, and people host that for free, and we share things that way. And, you know, and for us, it's been an absolutely amazing way of connecting with the people in the communities that we visit, because we stay with the locals. We really integrate into those community networks. And because we're staying in so many different people's homes, we really get to see how people live in all sorts of different ways. But again, you know, everyone having that same kind of openness and being really generous and kind and hospitable to us, you know, that kind of core human value of supporting each other. So that community building has just been such a fundamental part of what we do, but also we see it as just absolutely necessary in order for our society to really be able to solve some of these environmental problems that we face. We have to start to connect more as communities, to find solutions, to share skills and resources, you know, particularly between people of older generations who remember a different way of doing things, who have skills that a lot of younger people don't have anymore, and passing some of those things on. So, all of those things are so fundamental to low waste living and to so many other survival skills almost, I feel like, for the future.
For us too, our relationship with money is also quite odd, or like freaks a lot of people out. Like because we from the get-go we're like, we're doing our talks for free, we're providing food at our talks for free, we want people to come, we don't want there to be barriers to access, and we actually don't want to invest time in convincing people that we're worth being paid for, because actually that can take up an enormous amount of time. And we had lots of people in the early days be like, well, how are you going to make this financially sustainable? And almost took it as a moral affront that we'd be offering our knowledge for free. And it's just such an interesting phenomenon, really, because, we actually, what is money for, really? It's to enable us to have somewhere safe to sleep and to put our stuff and to eat. Pretty much everything else is unnecessary. And so through couch surfing, we have, the shelter and the accommodation, and we had a $20 a day budget that we did source through various means, and that is more than enough for food. So what more does one need? I mean, we don't have dependents or anything like that. If we had kids, it might be a different story. Don't know, we haven't had that life experience. But and it's opened up so many possibilities, and we've learned so much through this approach. And I feel like, just what Liam was saying, that it's taken us way closer to the kind of lifestyle that helps you to reduce waste than perhaps if we had lots of income coming through. The other thing that we had to do early on was decide how we would transport ourselves, because obviously we're on the road full time. So again, lots of people always ask us, do you have a van? Do you live in a van? We're like, no, we don't live in a van. And the reason for that is, to have a van big enough to live in, we'd be emitting a lot of fossil fuels, which we didn't want. And we also wouldn't be connecting with the community in the same way. We'd literally just be like arriving and doing our talk and going. So initially we got the smallest car we could possibly find, that wasn't an EV, because we couldn't afford an EV. And so we got this Honda Fit, and we drove around in that for 18 months, but with bikes on the back. So, we'd arrive and then we'd park the car, and then for like 3 weeks, we wouldn't come back to it. We would just cycle everywhere. And then after about 18 months, we were like, we just actually can't justify driving this car anymore. And so we sold it, and we just switched to hitchhiking, public transport, and borrowing bikes when we arrived in places, and walking. And everybody, again, it was like the money thing. People were like, oh, you'll never be able to do it without a car. It's not possible in New Zealand, and blah, 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 blah. And you'll have to rely on people to drive you around, and it will take up more carbon emissions, and blah, 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 blah. And so we actually logged every single kilometre of transport we did, and including if we got a lift with someone, and who then had to drive back. So it was double the journey, and a bigger car than a Honda Fit. We calculated all of it, every kilometre for a whole year. And we found that we still saved, I think it was, I can't remember, it's on our website, but it was close to 1 ton or 2 tons of CO2 directly from the decision of not having a car. So yeah, and again, it was all sharing through hitchhiking. And through hitchhiking, we met people that would never come to our talks.
Yeah. Again, that connection, that building community and building dialogue with people that you might not normally, mingle with. So we had the most amazing conversations.
And the great thing is, like, because you're in their car and they're doing you a favor, and if they say something that you find, like we've had quite a few rides with climate deniers, like you actually have to practice non-violent communication. Listening is really important. Like the kinds of communication styles that frankly I find really hard if I'm not locked in a car with someone. So it's really great, to understand where people are coming from and all that kind of thing.
And find the common ground again, like we had this one hitchhiking experience which was quite amusing, because it was a farmer down in central Otago, and he picked us up and he just started talking for a while. And
he didn't know what we were doing.
Yeah, he didn't ask us about what he was just talking. And very quickly he started talking about what he called this climate change horse shit. you know, and, you know, talking about how it was all bollocks or whatever. And then a few minutes later, again, before asking us anything, he said, but you know what I think is the real problem? It's rubbish and plastic and waste. And so
and
let's
I was
talk
like,
about that.
That's interesting. Tell me more about rubbish and plastic and waste.
And we, you know, and we actually talked, and, you know, because as Hannah mentioned earlier, we also see waste as a climate change issue as well. So we actually were able to talk about some of those issues, try to make some of those connections, and probably get a lot further and kind of mutually understanding each other than if we had have just been like, oh no, climate change is real, what are you talking about, you know. So actually it was, yeah.
And
so
the most important thing to remember too is this person was kind enough to see us, stop his car, pick us up, put our 1,001 suitcases in his bag, because we travel with a lot of crap. Like, fundamentally, this person is a good person who just happens to have a completely different ideological worldview. And I think that's such an important thing to remember. And that's really, when you're really reliant on people through the sharing economy, you learn to not personalize people's ideological beliefs. And quite frankly, probably a lot of people think we're psychos, you know, because we're so ego or whatever they think of us. So, you know, it's really nice to be able to be put in these situations where you see the common humanity.
Yeah, and this is something actually what you just said that I talk about all of the time. I believe that fundamentally we are all kind people. Like, everyone is kind. We just have different upbringings, different conditions that are stored in our being, that this is how we are seeing things. But as you say, like, this person is kind enough to give you a ride, whereas another person that perhaps cares a lot more about climate change perhaps wouldn't do that. And it's like, is someone better than the other? No, we are just different. But as well, for me, one of the interesting things of this lifestyle that you've been having for the past few years is the fact that when we actually have the time to connect to someone and to talk and to go with openness in that conversation, not judging, just openness to be able to hear where they are coming from, what they are saying, and to find that common ground, to understand, like, this is why you're saying this, or this is why you're saying this. It's one of the reasons why, for example, a lot of times I, like, being vegan, like, a lot of times I hear a lot of people in my circles as well complaining about farmers. And although I understand why they're saying that, a lot of times I'm like, those people are doing the best that they can with their circumstances and with the guidelines that they have been given. So unless something changes in their lives, they are doing the best that they think that they are doing. Like, it's not that they are doing something for, like, destroying the land or harming some beings or for climate change. They are doing the best that they can and having the time to be able to have a dialogue with these people. It's incredible. And with that in mind, I wanted to ask, do you find a lot of, in your talks, a lot of resistance from people? Because I find a lot of times at the conscious action events that a huge amount of people are already open to this kind of living and understandings, and there's always a small percentage of people that this is all new. What do you find in your events with that, and how do people respond that perhaps don't think the same way?
I mean, I think a lot of people that come to our talks are quite self-selecting, you know, like people who choose to come to a talk called Reducing Our Household Rubbish. Obviously, people on some level who are interested in reducing their rubbish. For us, though, actually, and we always like to remind people, because they'll say things like, oh, you're just preaching to the converted and blah, 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 is actually our aim with the rubbish trip is not to convert people who think there's nothing wrong with producing rubbish. Our aim with the rubbish trip is to reach people who care about these issues but aren't sure what to do or how to start, and don't necessarily know the full scale of the problem, and would like to know, you know, how to talk to people about it, but also how to live without waste. So we're quite happy with the people that come to our talks, in the sense that, generally speaking, I think most people who come to our talks aren't living zero waste. So there's something for them to gain from that. So we're very focused on sort of critical mass theory. For us, you don't need to convert the entire population. You just need to reach people who are broadly on board and get enough of a climate where reducing waste seriously is considered to be a normal thing to want to aspire to do. And that's when you start to trigger that cultural change that leads to policy change and regulation and so on.
Yeah.
There have been the odd times when we are in a, you know, for a lot of our community talks, it's self-selecting, but sometimes we'll go in to talk to schools or we'll go in to talk to businesses, and that will have been put on for the school or the business. And so there'll be a chunk of the audience that is kind of forced to be there. And it does change the dynamic a lot. And I'm not sure that I think that dynamic change is productive, actually, to be honest with you. Because like I say, we're not there to convince people that this is worthwhile. We're there to support people who already agree.
Yeah.
Sorry, 1 second.
Yeah.
No idea. Sorry.
That's all good.
Sorry about that.
This is part of the lockdown and being able to
the lockdown
with people
reality.
in the house and doing all of this.
Yeah.
What's the so a lot of times when I'm like actually like talking with people with this is that, and this is something that we talked about earlier, how much importance do you give to the knowledge and how much importance do you give to the reason behind acting with that? Because I find a lot of times that when I'm talking with people, especially when I go to some businesses or school, when again I'm not talking to people that care about this, I give them a little bit of information about, well, this is how you reduce, or this is how you refuse, and this is how, like, the hierarchy of reducing our waste. But most of the time I go into like, why do you care about this? Like, what is it that you care about? And let's see how that connects to you doing this. Do you find a lot of times that when you're talking with people, where do you focus more and where do people focus more?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting point because, you know, for example, a lot of documentaries with these kinds of issues that cover these kinds of issues, they so often focus on the issue, the problems, the terrible, sad, depressing reality of these things. And then they might spend a couple of minutes at the end giving you a couple of solutions, but really it doesn't make up for this terrible feeling that you have that it's all hopeless. You know, sometimes I've certainly had that experience. And with our presentations, we didn't want to do that. We wanted to talk a little bit about the problems and the reasons and the motivations for us for living this lifestyle. But then we really wanted to focus on the solutions. And but then again, of course, as you're kind of alluding to, everyone has a different reason and a different reason why they're there, what they want to learn, what's motivating them. And so we have this 2-hour-long presentation, which it started off as 1 hour and it got longer and longer because we did realize people did have all these different kinds of entry points. You know, like some people just want to come because they want to be more resourceful in their household and they want to learn how to make a lot of things from scratch. And so we cover that. But some people want to know what can we do to lobby and advocate for policy change at the government level, and you know, what's corporate responsibility issues around this. And so we do cover some of those issues as well. And I think again it's trying to weave that through with really practical solutions so that people always have an entry point. Whatever their interest is, they have the entry point. They can come back to the reason of the pollution and the harm that it's causing, but they have that access, that action that they can take immediately, whatever their interest is.
But again, because most of the people who come to our talks broadly want to reduce their waste, we presume that they've already worked out why they want to and what's important to them. But for us, what's really important, and I'm quite a knowledge-driven person, so of course we sort of structure it a little bit around how we would like to receive the information, rightly or wrongly. But for me, I need to know the details and I need to be accurate. That's really important to me when I make decisions. If I'm going to make a decision to change my life, I need to know that that's the right thing to do, that it's worthwhile. For example, not using plastic bags. I'm not going to switch to using paper bags unless I know that that's a better outcome. And it turns out it's not. Reusables are better, and I need to use the reusable X amount of times to break even with the amount of. So I need to know all that information. Is really important to me. So when we talk about the problem, actually what we are doing is not convincing people that it's a problem. What we are doing is ironing out the common misinformation, because waste and recycling in New Zealand is so complicated. So much information is hidden from the public. It's different across the country. And frankly, like, we hear the same incorrect things coming to us from the general public, like, oh, it's pointless recycling. It all goes to landfill anyway. Oh, all the plastic is burnt in Malaysia. Oh, glass is fine because it's infinitely recyclable. Oh, if paper goes to landfill, that's okay. At least it's not plastic. Like all of these things. So for us, we're providing that information as a way to arm people who do care with the correct knowledge, so that they don't go on spreading misinformation around New Zealand too. So I guess that's maybe not behaviour change 101, but that's our motivation.
No, and I mean, and it's right, because this is one of the things that I find with a lot of people, is that we have a lot of misconceptions, and we think that we might know, and then it's like, oh wait, like actually I don't, and being able to take that approach of having all of these misconceptions and being like, oh, actually this, like, also see it from here, so perhaps that brown bag is not better than the plastic bag, and
or it depends, right?
Yeah, and it's something like, actually, like, when I started talking with people, when they started opening more and more, at least here in Auckland, of the refilleries, and I see a lot of people like going and grabbing the paper bags, and I'm like, and I talk to some people sometimes in there, and like, well, not now, because now I need to maintain distance, but like in normal times before, I would be like, hey, like, perhaps don't use that, because you will need to reuse it a lot of times. And I actually I use a co-working space here in Auckland, and every time that someone came with one of those bags and they were going to put it in the bin, I just grabbed it, and now I have a bag full of those bags, and I keep on reusing them.
Right.
And I use them until literally there's holes in them, and then of course they are not worth anymore as bags. But then I if it's a actually paper bag, then I compost it. So I know at least I'm doing a little of the correct thing. But I think that we are getting a little bit I mean, it's almost an hour that we've been talking, which is awesome, but I don't want to take too much more of your time. So I'm just going to ask you a few questions that I ask at every guest that comes to the podcast. And the first one is, what's one resource that you would recommend to others? And this is tough because there's so many resources, but
I guess it depends what people want to achieve. If we're focusing on zero waste.
Well, yeah, I mean, a big part of what we do is to provide resources for people to support them, beyond our presentations, to actually solidify some of these things. And one resource that we've created and we maintain, but we would love, we really love it to be a community resource, is these zero waste guides for every region of New Zealand, and the kinds of businesses, the kinds of community organizations, and all of the options to help people reduce their waste. What's available in a region, we've just listed them. We've put them on a map as well, so people can find if they prefer the visual thing. So, and again, we want those to be relevant all the time. We want people to write to us and say, oh, do you know about this place? Or, this place has changed their stock, or they changed their owner and they've got a different philosophy, or whatever. And so it's this community resource to support people. I mean, like we use it ourselves as a resource when we're traveling. You know, oh, we're in you know, Timaru. Oh, let's look up our guides. Where can we shop? That kind of thing. So, and we hope it's the same for other people. So that's one resource we find valuable and hope others do too.
Yeah, I mean, but there's so many. We're so lucky these days, with the internet, so you can pretty much find so many wonderful resources. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a good one. Like I actually when I was planning before all of this, I was planning on traveling a little bit around the country, doing a few events and workshops, and I was thinking like, oh, what do I need to do? And I remembered that I saw like a while ago that you guys had this guide, so I was like, oh, I'm just going to use that. So it's actually a good resource.
Thanks.
What is your one go-to tip?
We have like both a psychological go-to tip and a practical one. And the first is in the area of lifestyle change, environmentally motivated lifestyle change. The most important first step is to make the commitment, whatever it is, and be really clear with yourself that that's what you're doing. So for us, it was, we're going to live without a rubbish bin. And we committed to that, because once you've made that commitment, then what it means is that you will find solutions where you might not have otherwise expected them. If you haven't made that commitment, it's very easy to make excuses and say, oh, well, I forgot my cup today, so I guess I'll just, And in terms of practical tip, we always say the biggest thing that anybody can do to reduce their waste is to get organic waste out of their rubbish bins. So food waste, green waste, and paper and cardboard, because that stuff going to landfill produces methane. And it's so easily dealt with just with a compost, a cushy bin, or a worm farm, and that will reduce the average bin by 30 to 50% overnight.
And all of that stuff is a resource anyway. Why give it away? Why not use it, reuse it, regenerate the soil, grow vegetables, all those sorts of things.
Yeah, which immediately connects you with the philosophy of zero waste, that there's no such thing as waste, only resources in the wrong place.
Yes. So well said, because that's, I think, that in the view of how can we continue into the future, and I use a lot the circular way, like circular economy, and that is the understanding that there's no such thing as waste. In nature, there's no waste. Everything gets transformed somehow. So how are we going to be able to continue doing that? So, beautiful. What was your last small act of kindness?
Well, interestingly, with the move from level 4 to level 3 in New Zealand with the COVID-19 alert levels, hospitality was allowed to open up, and that meant a lot of takeaway, outlets were able to sell their things, but that also meant a lot more of this throwaway, takeaway packaging. And there is this tension there for people who care about the rubbish that's produced in those situations, that we want to avoid the rubbish, but we also, we want to support these local businesses, these people who depend on that for their livelihood. And how do we balance those two things? So we actually started doing, we were inspired by some other people who are doing this thing called fakeaways or fake out, and just, making a meal that is like you would get for takeaways. So burgers and chips or pizza or curry or something like that. And
then we donate the money to a business that is doing awesome food related stuff or can't open under alert level 3. So we've donated to the Common Unity Project in Wellington, Everybody Eats in Auckland, Palette Wholesome Collective in Whangarei, which is an awesome vegan gluten-free outlet, and the Rogan Vagabond in Wellington so far. But yeah, so we're doing a series of these posts. So trying to strike the balance between not producing waste, but still supporting businesses that need our support.
Yeah, and that's important, because I saw and I assume that a lot of people saw the images of the first day of level 3 with all of these rubbish bins overflowing with all of the takeaway packaging, and I was like, okay, and then I started seeing likely that the government was starting to allow a little bit more like reusable, and now. And if you can you tell a little bit about the campaign with throwaways, takeaways, so that people that are listening know a little bit more?
Yeah, we're also co-founders of a campaign called Takeaway Throwaways, which we co-founded with Laura Cope from Use Your Own Cafe Directory. And so the campaign includes a petition, and we started it before the COVID-19 thing. It's a petition calling on the government to phase out single-use disposable serviceware containing plastic, including compostable plastics. So that's, takeaway cups, containers, cutlery, all that kind of stuff. But not just to ban it, but also to mandate reusable alternatives at scale, and to support New Zealand to co-design those reuse schemes so that there's something to replace those single-use items with. So we've got a petition calling on the government to do that, and we're providing lots of resources. And at the moment, we're providing guidelines for how hospitality outlets can provide contactless food and drink without using disposables. And of course, they're within their rights to ignore us, but there are options available for those who would like to give it a go. And there are lots of outlets who are now exploring these options, which is awesome.
Yeah, because the campaign is based around a petition to government, and we would like government to take action on that, because that would just transform. It would level the playing field, and everyone would have to do it, but it would make it easier to do it at the same time. But while we're waiting for that to happen, we just want to do everything that we possibly can to support people to make the transition, to move away from single-use packaging or whatever, in whatever way they can within their budgets, within their constraints. So we're really kind of just focusing on solutions, everyday solutions with that as well. So lots of resources on the website to, for even from the smallest coffee cart, for example, up to stadium events. How can all these different kinds of situations reduce their single-use waste?
Yeah, and I think that is such an amazing. I've been following the Throwaway Takeaways campaign, as well as because of Laura from Use Your Own Cup. She's just an amazing
So
individual. And I remember a few months ago, and she gave me a call, and she told me you guys, you should talk, and you need to meet Lian and Hannah. And I was like, okay, next time that you guys are here in Auckland, we'll meet. And and this, one of the things that I find with what you just mentioned that is so important is, it's not only telling people don't do that, is what's the alternative? It's don't do that, but you can do this.
Yeah.
It's not just don't do that.
That's
because
right.
if not, yeah.
Well, yeah, and in fact, the legislation that enables the government to ban things, they can only do it if there's a reasonable alternative. So that principle is actually also codified into our legislation. So yeah, we have to be solutions oriented at all times, and that's great. That's a great thing to be forced to be. I love coming up with it. Yeah, because it gives you an opportunity to be creative and positive.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, a big one. What's the one thing you wish the world knew?
Well, actually, that's a nice question to tie with the last answer as well, because, if we're talking about what we shouldn't do, what we should get rid of, and then replace it with the alternative, a lot of people often think of that alternative as a sacrifice, and, you have to give this up, you have to give that up, you're more miserable, you can't get that favorite sweet that comes in plastic packaging or whatever. But, in our experience of making that transition to this alternative lifestyle has been so much more positive than we expected. In so many different ways, like even just practical things like saving money, things being simpler, eating healthier food, but on a bigger scale, like just feeling so much more fulfilled and more connected. It's just been so positive in so many ways. We would just love for people to realize that a lot of these alternatives are better than the current way of doing things in so many ways. And sometimes you just have to go through with it to experience that. And so, give it a go.
I don't know if you know about Miriama Kamo, the TV presenter who's on zero waste. She is a great advocate for that. She's so good at articulating it that she tried zero waste for a month and now she's over a year in and she couldn't stop because she loved it so much. So yeah, if you have a chance, or anyone who's listening has a chance to listen to her talk about it, it's exactly that. Yeah, we wish more people knew how beneficial this way of living is. Yeah,
and it's true for me as well. Like, I mean, I started the path of living an alternative life from a completely different perspective. It was more of a spiritual one, and then that opened up to the living more like slowly and like low waste and vegan and this and that, and it's just an amazing lifestyle. And I think that for people that perhaps have different circumstances, it's more challenging, as you were saying before. Like if someone is a parent, then your circumstances are different in terms of making these kind of changes. But I always recommend to everyone that is single or a couple that is young and don't have much responsibilities, like give it a go, because this is such an amazing way of exploring and living. And you know, if it doesn't work, you can always go back and find some work. Like this is one of the things that I mean, I live a life that I know that most people wouldn't be able to if they are not choosing actively to do this. Because as you guys were saying, like my relationship as well with money, it's very different than with most people. Like a lot of people, when I talk to them and I tell them like how much money I have, they're like, why are you not freaking out?
Yeah.
And I mean, at different moments I have a little bit more, and different moments I have a little bit less, but still it's like, why are you not freaking out? And I'm like, well, because we don't really need that much. Like you need a lot if you're spending a lot, but if you're not spending a lot, then you don't need a lot. And the more that we have people like you that can actually show other people, you can travel around the country, you can meet people, you can still have a shelter on top of your head, and you can have food, and you can have amazing experiences, and that doesn't require that much money. And I think that that's something that now a lot of people with the lockdown, a lot of people saved a lot of money. Like a lot of people are having a lot of issues financially as well, but a lot of people have been able to say like, oh wow, like I'm having so much money, and then supporting your locals and things like that. So yeah, it's an incredible time, because I think that there's a lot of reshaping and resetting the ways that we've been doing. And now my biggest thing is, okay, like how are we going to move on as we go back to level 2, and then outside of this entire level is, what is the world going to look like, or what are the cities or the country going to look like, and are people going to take the learnings from this time, or are they going to go back to the way that things were? Yeah. And to finish up, guys, what's the best way to find you for people? Like, I know of course now you're not on the road, but how can people get involved and see what you guys are up to?
Yeah, so we've always been really active online, even when we're traveling around. So we're maintaining all of that presence on our website, therubbistrip.co.nz, and also on Facebook, just The Rubbish Strip, and Instagram, The Rubbish Strip, and through Takeaway Throwaways as well, takeawaythrowaways.nz, and that's on Insta and Facebook as well. So that's the best way to connect with us. And at the moment, we're doing a few events online. We're sort of featuring in webinars and panel discussions and that kind of thing. And so if people would like to hear us talk, we're not doing our flagship presentation over the internet or anything like that. It's more of an in-person kind of thing, but for the moment, we're all traceable online.
Yep.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, guys, for being here and for the work that you're doing for the world and for everyone here, at least in New Zealand. I really appreciate people like you that that are actually passionate about this and want to share it with everyone, and are creating resources that are helpful. So thank you very much for that, and thank you for being here and talking with me and spending the time. And I really hope that the next time that you guys are here in Auckland, that we can meet in person and connect.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That would be
Thank you so
wonderful.
much, Brian. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you. Really, really interesting conversations, and it's been a great opportunity to really get into some of the more meaty issues. And yeah, we really value these kinds of conversations. So thanks for inviting us.
And thanks for all the work you do, and we can't wait to come and see the Contraception space. On our bucket list of things to do in Auckland. So
Nice, awesome. Thank you, guys. And yeah, I hope that everyone you took something from this episode. And if you did learn something, leave us a comment, or just make sure that you follow Liana and Hannah on the rubbish trip. Follow their trip and keep on following us on the next episode. So if you have something that you'd like us to talk about on the podcast, make sure to let us know, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
bye.
What did you like the most about this episode? Take a moment to think about what change you can make in your life today.
Share your conscious action on social media using #ConsciousAction and tagging @ConsciousActionNZ so we can celebrate your impact on the world and create a ripple effect.
One easy action we would love for you to take right now is to share, like, and subscribe to this podcast. This will help us get these messages out into the world and inspire more people to take conscious action in their own lives, contributing to the better world we hope for.